So, as promised, The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. And let me just go ahead and assure you that the best thing about this movie is the subtitle. The Heretic, it's a cool subtitle. It doesn't really relate to the movie at all. Um, but it sounds cool. It gives you this kind of stark impression of medieval sorcery, darkness, religiosity, that kind of thing. So, it sounds cool. The Heretic. Just a good, blunt, dark sounding subtitle for one of the worst sequels ever made.
4 years ago, The Exorcist shocked the world. Now, the struggle between good and evil goes on. Exorcist 2, The Heretic.
Okay, when you think of bad sequels, a few probably come to mind. The sequel to but see, often bad sequels are just forgotten. You don't even remember they were made. How many people remember there was a sequel to Chinatown? There was. It was called The Two Jakes, and it sucked. Caddyshack, there's a sequel. Caddyshack 2. Chevy Chase had a cameo in it. It's terrible. Every so often, a great movie gets a really lousy sequel. Just a startlingly bad sequel. And it kind of feels like The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, was a cursed film. It's almost every decision made with this movie seems to have been the wrong decision. So first off, you hire a director, John Boorman, who hated the first movie. He wasn't subtle about this. He thought The Exorcist, the original movie, glorified child abuse. Talk about missing the point. And this is the guy who filmed Deliverance, the movie where hillbillies are running around raping other men. But The Exorcist went too far. And this was coming off of Zardoz, one of the most notoriously surreal sci-fi films ever made, where Sean Connery's character, the hero, flat out says, "I'm a rapist." The Exorcist went too far for him. God knows, I don't know. Then you get a screenwriter who only has one previous credit, and it's adapting his own play. So an unproven screenwriter, a director that hates the movie, and they come together to make one of the most surreal, bizarre, disjointed messes a major studio has ever dared drop into theaters. This thing was so unpopular that it was actually pulled and re-edited after the first 2 weeks because audiences hated it so much. I'm going to do my best, my level best, to explain the plot to this movie. Here we go. So Reagan, the possessed girl from the first film, played by returning star Linda Blair, is in therapy over the events of what happened, even though she doesn't remember them. And it's been several years. I believe it's been 4 years. So I don't know what she's doing in therapy, just saying, yep, still don't remember. Sorry. But and on the other side of that, a new priest who, let's just call him Father Karras Part 2, because this guy's the exact same character that Jason Miller played in the first movie. He's a glowering, dark-haired, ruddy-faced, ruggedly handsome priest who is experiencing a crisis of faith, but is still given a high-profile mission by the church. It's just Father Karras. It's just Father Karras played by a different actor. Richard Burton this time. Not literally, it's not Father Karras. Father Karras doesn't return until part 3. Yeah, the guy that died at the end of part 1 spectacularly committed suicide to save the girl. He's back in part 3. And this one is just a guy that acts the exact same and looks a lot like him. So, this priest, I believe his name is Morrow, is tasked with discovering what happened to Father Merrin. That's the old man, Max von Sydow character, the title character from The Exorcist. And the reason is that the church is moving away from literal readings of Scripture. So Father Merrin was believed in the literal interpretation of the Scripture. He believed that God, the devil, were there. The church is moving away from that and are apparently considering accusing him of heresy because he believes in Scripture. Does this make sense? This doesn't make sense. So the Catholic Church, which has defended pedophile priests before, is going to throw a man who died trying to save a little girl under the bus for the sake of what?
Max von Sydow, James Earl Jones, Exorcist II, The Heretic.
So that's a really dumb inciting incident. That's what the movie hinges on, for God's sake. It doesn't work. But that's just the tip of the iceberg for what doesn't work about this movie. From there, Father Morrow, Richard Burton, talks to Reagan, who is in this science fiction hypnotherapy thing where she's mind melding with her new doctor, played by Louise Fletcher from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Nurse Ratched, to go through her memories to try and figure out what happened to her. Father Morrow, he gets involved with the machine, and I mean, it's science fiction. It's a machine that allows you to link with other people under hypnosis to read through their minds like it's the goddamn Cell or something, if you remember that Jennifer Lopez movie from forever ago. And all this ties into an exorcism Father Marin, again, guy from the first movie, performed in Africa on this tribal boy who was trying to do some sort of ritual to get rid of a plague of locusts and end up being demonically possessed, and Marin had to come in and save him. And Reagan is haunted by visions of locusts, and the priest kind of starts to believe that Reagan has psychic abilities. Then the priest goes back to the original house from The Exorcist for basically no reason. Then he goes to Africa to find the kid who was possessed, and he's trying to figure out the name of the demon, Pazuzu, which was never said in the first movie. It was in the book, but it was never said in the first movie. And then he wanders around in Africa. It turns into Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Pazuzu's grave or some damn thing. It's stupid. This priest is wandering around Africa for a while, and he finds James Earl Jones as the grown-up version of the possessed boy. James Earl Jones, voice of Darth Vader, villain from the original Conan movie. Then James Earl Jones vomits an egg for some reason, and suddenly he's a doctor. Then they go back to America, and he has a vision from Father Marin that tells him, Max von Sydow has a cameo in this movie, that tells him that he has to protect Reagan, but then he starts acting evil, and he kidnaps Reagan and takes her back to the house from the original movie, and Louise Fletcher comes with them, and this is as disjointed as it sounds. I'm not doing a really bad job of explaining this. The script is just this terrible. It is all over the place. There is no flow, there is no cohesion, there is no narrative thrust. It is just things that happen. So then they get back to the house from the original film, and Louise Fletcher is accompanied by Reagan's nanny, tutor, paid friend from the first movie. Remember that woman that lived in the house with her and her mom that always just looked really freaked out by everything? She's the other returning cast member, so you get Max von Sydow in a cameo, Linda Blair as a lead, and this woman in a supporting role. And then the woman, the nanny, whatever you want to call her, goes crazy all of a sudden and lights herself on fire. Then Reagan, who has a dark side version of herself, tries to seduce the priest, and keep in mind Linda Blair is underage in this movie. She's still not 18, so that's creepy. This dude's 50. Then she shows up with some glamour makeup on, like she's about to appear in the Let's Get Physical music video. It's the dumbest damn thing. It looks like Olivia Newton-John or some friggin' thing. And then the priest kills the doppelganger, and Reagan does the thing, and a bunch of locusts show up, but Reagan makes them leave because she's a being of pure good, apparently. And then the movie just ends. This movie's awful. This movie is so bad. So, I love Linda Blair. Linda Blair is actually one of my favorite actresses. And I've seen most of the movies that she's been in. And Linda Blair has been in one good movie in her entire career. And it is, of course, Hell Night, the classic 1980s slasher. No, it's The Exorcist. The Exorcist is the only good movie she's ever been in. I hear good things about one TV movie she did in the mid-70s. I think it might have been called Little Girl Lost, where she's a girl in a like a YDC, like Youth Department of Corrections, but I never saw it. I did see a lot of her other movies though. I saw Grotesque, I saw Hell Night, I saw Red Heat, Chained Heat, I saw Repossessed, the Exorcist parody with Leslie Nielsen. I saw stuff from the 90s when her career really bottomed out and she was in just god awful, like Zapped Again. I saw Zapped Again. Who saw Zapped Again? Me. I saw Zapped Again. Her career really went downhill in the 90s, and by the 2000s she was basically out of the picture. But I saw The Exorcist 2, and The Exorcist 2 was a bit of a career killer for her. That and a cocaine conviction. So, yeah, it's not that her performance is bad in this movie. It's that the way they present Regan is not good. It's very boring. She's just presented as this sort of sunny side up flower child, just big smile, always chipper. She was like helping children. She psychically heals an autistic girl at one point. She has a vision of a fire and saves a bunch of kids. So they do her a tremendous disservice and adding insult to injury. So Linda Blair wouldn't do the makeup again. She said it was too arduous, it was too much. She wouldn't do this movie if she had to do the makeup again. So all that makeup from the first movie, they used a body double for her. And the body double's terrible. Now, Linda Blair, even in her late teens, was already a very curvy woman. But even before that, even as a child, she was a thick child. Even before she had breasts, she was a thick child. And this body double is a thin, sinewy woman who looks 10 years older than Linda Blair at least. And they do this dumbass crossfade effect at one point where it's Linda Blair's face and it's possessed face and it's Linda Blair's face. And it just makes it abundantly clear this isn't her. We get a flashback to Father Marin's death, which is stupid. Father Marin was very old, he was in a very stressful situation, and he was on heart medication. We see the pills repeatedly. He died of a heart attack. I don't need an explanation. I don't need a flashback to show that Regan psychically crushed his heart in his chest. That's stupid. And I can't believe they got Max von Sydow to come back. I mean, I know it's just a cameo, basically, but I'm still surprised the actor was willing to do it. I'm at a loss. Okay, so one actor they didn't get to come back was Ellen Burstyn, the woman who played Reagan's mom. Now, I can only imagine that Ellen Burstyn said, yeah, y'all go ahead and make Exorcist 2. I'm going to continue having a respectable career. So her role, what was undoubtedly meant to be her role is essentially split between two characters. The Louise Fletcher, who's a very maternal figure, even though she's her therapist, she's always sweet and loving and caring and concerned, and she shows up at her house. And the nanny character from the first movie, who's just kind of extraneous until she dies at the end. But she's Regan's guardian, essentially, because Regan isn't 18 yet, so I guess she would have had to have for story purposes, she has to have a guardian, so that's who they choose to make her guardian, just to fill in that little plot hole. On the flip side of that, the movie's star, Richard Burton, who was a massive star in the 60s. He was a big star. Very respected actor. But by the time this movie was made, he was descending into alcoholism hardcore. And maybe that accounts for why he only essentially has maybe 2 facial expressions through the whole movie. He plays the entire flick in a single note of concerned disbelief. Just the whole flick, that's just him. Except for this one weird moment where they're on a bus together, him and Regan. And someone's taking tickets for the bus, and they come up to him. And it's like, can I have your ticket? And he gives them then he goes to Linda Blair and says, can I have your ticket? And he just turns to them and goes, leave her, that girl is mine. That's a perfectly normal thing for a 50-year-old man to say about a 17-year-old girl sitting next to him. That's when you call the cops. I think this girl has been abducted. But the ticket taker doesn't even respond to it. He's just like, oh, okay, I guess the girl belongs to him. Well, none of my business. So, supposedly this thing was being rewritten constantly throughout production. Linda Blair has said that the original script was actually pretty good, but they kept reworking it throughout the filming, and as a result, the end of the movie is just a mess. You can't make heads or tails of this thing. Ennio Morricone, who recently won the Oscar for scoring The Hateful Eight, and did the score for The Thing. He did the score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He's a legendary composer. He did the score for this, and the score is weird, but it fits the movie, and it has great moments. It's not his best score by far, but it has its moments, and it fits the movie that he undoubtedly, he's scoring this movie. He's not scoring a better movie or a more coherent movie. So it fits the movie he wrote it for. So there's so many dumb moments, and there's this whole, you could almost call it a subplot about Reagan being in this high school musical Broadway, ode to Broadway performance that's dumb looking. It starts out with her tap dancing. Like, the movie just about starts out with her tap dancing while this boy or girl, I legitimately couldn't tell, is flirting with her. I swear to God, it could have been either one. I don't know. It was male or female. I got nothing. But, and that guy's never in it again, I don't think. Maybe in the scene where she collapses later. So, there's not even an exorcism in this movie. And the reason this movie is called The Heretic, like, Max von Sydow is technically the title character of this movie, again. Now, in the first movie, he's kind of the hero, even though he's not in it that much, so I kind of see, and, The Exorcist, you could argue The Exorcist is a title, and it's about Father Karras finding it within himself to become the Exorcist when Father Merrin fails. But you could argue that. This movie, The Heretic, there's no mention of heresy or heretical behavior anywhere except in relation to Father Merrin, which means that the only reading is that this is The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, Father Merrin. Father Merrin's in this movie for 6 minutes, maybe. Why would he be the title character? He's a cameo. You could cut him out of this movie easily. And for anyone who hasn't ever bothered to look it up, I had to look it up the first time I saw this movie. Heretic means someone who disbelieves in God. Not the same as an atheist. They believe in God, but they don't follow the teachings of God. So, I've probably seen this thing 3 or 4 times. And the reason I've seen this god-awful mess 3 or 4 times is because every time a year or 2 or 3 or 4 passes, and I think, it can't possibly be as bad as I remember it. And then every time I watch it, something else strikes me as being awful. So I watched this maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I remember thinking to myself how astonishingly incoherent it is. Just, this is a hard movie to follow, to understand, to explain. It's just a disaster of half-formed ideas. And this time I watched it because I guess I remembered enough to not be shocked by just, there's a locust, and there's a giant locust. It's like Mothra. I'm not kidding. There's like a Mothra-sized locust in this movie. The size of a small passenger airplane. And then James Earl Jones roars like a jaguar at one point. I remember all that. But what struck me this time is how remarkably boring this movie is. For all the insanity in it, it's still weirdly dull. This is a boring movie. There's no scares. The laughs are actually pretty infrequent. I mean, they're unintentional, but when you laugh, it's not that often that you laugh. And this flick is pretty close to 2 hours, and that's the shortened version. The characters are all uninteresting. Louise Fletcher probably comes the closest to coming out of this unscathed without really making a fool of herself. I mean, Louise Fletcher is a great actress who, this is one of 2 horror movies I've seen her in, where she is working her ass off to maintain a sense of dignity in a just disastrous movie, the other being Tobe Hooper's Invaders from Mars remake. That movie's kind of funny. That one, she plays this mean-ass teacher that becomes possessed by an alien. So, good points on this movie? None, really. I mean, Ennio Morricone's score is alright in places. It's kind of nice seeing Max von Sydow again, and without the heavy makeup, because he's all in flashbacks, so he's a young man. He's his own age. He's the age he was when this was filmed, in the scenes, and in most of the scenes he's in. Beyond that, there's nothing good here. This movie sucks. Everything about it is awful. It's hard. The only reason it's maintained this sort of weird, ironic cult following is because it's so bad. Because when you hear how terrible it is, you kind of think, it couldn't possibly be that bad. They're just exaggerating. They're just comparing it to the original, which was so good, so it looks bad. But no, No matter, by any metric, this movie is a disaster. This is horrible. And the thing is, John Boorman isn't an untalented filmmaker. He's made good movies. Deliverance is a good movie. Excalibur is a good movie. And the fact that this was made back-to-back with Zardoz only makes me think that he was going through a period in his life where he was either close to a mental breakdown or he was on some hardcore drugs. If you've ever seen Zardoz, you know what I mean. That is one of the strangest movies to ever come out of a major Hollywood studio. This thing is horrible, and it's not even the worst Exorcist movie. Because as boring and stupid and inept as this is, still isn't The Exorcist the beginning. And I think this is probably even better than Dominion. This sucks. The only way to watch this is out of morbid curiosity, and if you do that, I suggest you either have friends with you when you do it, or you just have some good alcohol with you. One or the other. Bad movie. Very, very bad movie.